Okay, class, today we are going to talk about another Supreme Court case.
Bruh, come on, it's almost the end of the year. Why are you torturing us with another Supreme Court case?
This case was in California's Supreme Court.
It
was one of the first cases to define a public interest.
I guess.
It set a precedent for future environmental regulation.
I guess.
It changed the course of California's economic development.
Damn near, let's get started!
Alright. At the beginning of the gold rush in the late 1840s, news of the newfound riches brought approximately 300,000 new residents from the eastern United States and abroad. Because the gold in the California gravel beds was so richly concentrated, early 49ers were able to retrieve loose gold flakes and nuggets with their hands, or simply pan for gold in rivers and streams. This method of retrieving gold was the most common for years, thus mining was somewhat dominated by individuals rather than large prospecting companies. This small-scale form of mining had a relatively non-existent effect on California's environment.
However, as the readily available gold supply diminished, and with technological advances, gold mining became an industrialized process. Placer miners in California discovered that the more gravel they could process, the more gold they were likely to find. Instead of working with pans, sluice boxes, long toms, and rockers, miners collaborated to find ways to process larger quantities of bore gravel rapidly. Hydraulic mining became the largest scale and most devastating form of placer mining. Large companies were started in the 1860s, like the North Bloomfield Mining Company. These companies received millions of dollars to carry out large-scale hydraulic mining operations.
In hydraulic mining, water stored in man-made reservoirs was then fired at high pressures through a cannon at hillsides. The resulting eroded sediment was passed through sluices or filters, which separated out the gold using its natural heavy weight. The gold was then refined using mercury. This mining technique was extremely effective and much less labor-intensive. For example, the North Bloomfield Company, in just 7 years, made $50 million in today's money from the process.
But the lucrative process brought with it severe environmental consequences. In the brief 25-year history of its use in California, the process dislodged between 885 million and 1.295 billion cubic yards of mining debris, equal to the total volume of over 1,000 aircraft carriers. The deposition of this sediment in rivers and floodplains had several devastating environmental effects. Initially, deposited sediment raised riverbeds, making Central Valley rivers unnavigable. For example, a local expert wrote in 1884,
"The navigation of Sacramento River has been so greatly impaired that the river which until the year 1862 was navigated as far as the city of Sacramento without difficulty by steamers of deep draught to wit, by boats drawing 9 or 10 feet of water has been since the year 1862 unnavigable as far as the city of Sacramento by boats of deep draught except during high water instead of at all times as formerly."
Some boats, like the steamer Alta, were grounded and trapped upstream permanently, where they were left to rot. The local expert went on to describe the flooding caused by eroded sediment.
"Rivers have shallowed so that the depths of the rivers have been greatly lessened and their liability to overflow has been materially increased, causing the frequent floods to extend their area and be more destructive than they otherwise would have been."
These floods began as early as 1862 with the Great Flood of Sacramento. In 1878, Sacramento was hit by another devastating flood recounted in an 1880 book.
"The noise of the torrent pouring through the broken levee could be heard distinctly at a great distance. That evening, the Sacramento River was 25 feet, 2 inches above the low water mark, higher than ever before known."
The sediment deposition also damaged early California agriculture. The same local expert wrote in 1884,
And as the rivers are at all times carrying in suspension the lighter earthy matter from the mines, they are likely to fill more rapidly in the future, and to cause much further and greater injury in the future to large tracts of land, probably rendering them within a few years unfit for cultivation and inhabitancy. This 1880s political cartoon from the Sacramento Sun demonstrates the destruction caused by hydraulic mining. In the mountains, water blasts away hillsides. As a result of higher stream beds, the farming valley is flooding, displacing residents. Levees struggle to hold back rising water levels, and ships are grounded in rivers, disrupting commerce. Overweight robber barons are depicted watching the impacts of their businesses, indifferent to the suffering of the public.
Solutions to hydraulic mining in California's Congress proved impossible due to heavy mining influence,
aka classic Gilded Age corruption.
However, in 1884, a court case was finally brought against the hydraulic mine.
The plaintiff in this case, Edwards Woodruff, was a business owner and a farmer based in Marysville. His structures, which included the steamboat dock, fell into disuse due to the destructive flooding. Woodruff was suing the North Bloomfield Mining Company for damages and for a permanent injunction or stoppage of hydraulic mining.
The North Bloomfield Mining Company fought harshly against the suit. They first argued that it had been the levees, quote,
gopher infested,
and badly maintained that had been the cause of the flooding. However, Judge Lorenzo Sawyer blamed the faulty levees on the mining practices, writing, quote,
levees continually and yearly require to be enlarged and strengthened to keep pace with the increase in the mass of debris thus sent down, at a great annual cost, defrayed by means of special taxation. The mining company next attempted to argue the legality of their dumping practices. They contended that the mere mention of hydraulic mining in previous laws gave them the
implicit
ability to dump tailings. The court then rejected this analysis, saying in the case that
express
permission was required. The court then went even further to explain that dumping was unconstitutional in the first place. The dumping of mine tailings, argued the court, must be,
quote, averted, not rendered lawful. Woodruff's lawyers then took full advantage of a key California law to back up their case. They cited the conditions under California's admittance as a state into the Union in 1850 on federal conditions that, quote,
all the navigable rivers within said state shall be common highways, and forever free as well to the inhabitants of said state as to the citizens of the United States.
The rivers, they argued, had become free to nobody.
At the end of the day, the court sided with Woodruff, citing the extreme environmental damage as a barrier to free trade, an infringement on property rights, and an overall nuisance against the,
quote, public interest
in the Central Valley.
Woodruff v. North Bloomfield decision effectively marked the end of the gold rush by banning hydraulic mining.
Newly built railroads presented the opportunity for mass exportation of goods, making agricultural work very attractive. Chinese railroad workers, now unemployed, also sought work, contributing to the widespread shift to farming. Thus, the case marked a shift in California's economy from mining to farming and manufacturing.
By validating the argument that businesses shouldn't be able to operate while harming others, the decision set a framework for future protection, including the Yosemite National Park Bill, the Debris Commission, the National Rivers and Harbors Act, the Water and Resource Conservation Act, and countless other modern protective bills.
Above all, the Woodruff decision set a precedent in which the government had not only the right, but the responsibility to protect public interest and the environment.